Mm-hmm. Hi, Steffi. Let me see if I read.
Better late than never.
Hi. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Dave, do you know the password for our IBC Wi-Fi? White Lotus Sangha. Triple gem, you think?
I think G is that one.
Let's see, connect automatically. Triple G is capitalized? Oh. Triple G. Triple G?
Yeah.
That's the whole thing? I'll try it.
Triple G, EM.
EM.
Triple G, lower EM.
EM. Okay.
Yeah, that's our router.
Isn't correct. Yeah, all right, something else.
You want our router?
Our
router is not connected to the internet. We lost that.
Yeah.
You need the.
Maybe Gretchen knows too.
Yeah, it'd be fantastic. I got it. I know I got it here somewhere.
Okay.
I just used her to text back, but I was on a marathon. Right when you got it, I was trying to get everybody here.
Yeah.
She got a raw milk. Might shut up.
It's half the battle.
Oh my God, I know.
Let's see if Gretchen knows.
Well, I could. That's an apple or not? That's the
No.
HP.
No.
You could share with her.
Don't ask me tough questions.
Well, no, there's Apple products you can share the password. You don't even have to.
I was training to be a stripper, so I wouldn't have to know math. It didn't work out very well.
Oh, WL Sangha 5, maybe?
No, that's our router.
That's our router.
IBC something router.
IBC Wi-Fi?
Yeah, that it might connect automatically.
Let me try that. Connect automatically. Connect. Let's see if it does.
Wait, so we don't have internet here? Yeah, we do, but it's not.
Through IBC.
It's one of those things that's imperfect. We're relying on a wired signal between us and IBC instead of a hard wire.
Oh, they need a password too.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Can you use a hotspot?
Hi.
Hi. Say, do you know the password for the Wi-Fi here?
I think it's triple gem,
Triple gem.
with no capitals, and it's all run together.
Okay, triple gem, no capitals.
Well, that's not IBC's. That's ours.
Yeah.
Is Dave there?
Dave's here. He's digging through stuff too.
Dave's here. I was trying to hook them up to IBC's Wi-Fi because our Wi-Fi is
Spotty.
I'm not sure. I haven't. Mine's. I got it.
I'll try it.
All right.
I got what do you have?
WL Sangha.
Oh yeah.
Or let's see. Yeah.
Okay, I get WL Sangha, and let's see if I'll try triple gem.
All lowercase. Try that. No, it's not. It's capital T.
Yeah.
Capital G. Triple T. Capital T. Triple
G,
Gem,
yeah,
all one word with a capital G.
Yeah.
Dollar sign.
and a dollar sign.
Oh, okay. Well, money, money,
All right,
money.
let's see if that works. Verifying and connecting. Cross your fingers.
Sounds good.
Yeah, well,
Across.
is incorrect.
Oh,
Please try
All
again.
right, okay, WL
right.
Sangha.
WL Sangha,
I'm
right?
sorry, the triple gem, the only capital is the G. That'll be
Triple
All right.
is not capital.
correct.
So try WL Sangha. Still with the dollar sign?
That's the,
Triple gem.
triple gem is the password,
Yeah, triple gem, capital G in there,
right, and a dollar sign.
and a dollar sign. Now let's try this. It's taking more time. It's good. Connected, secured. You're a genius. Dave got it.
Genius.
I'm
Here.
just lucky.
Dave is here.
That's why we pay him the big bucks.
Yeah.
All right. Here we go. Good. All right. Slowly, slowly, we are in business.
Step by step.
Okay, very good. Thank you for your patience. There was a quote here that I could only get one way. So that's what I was trying to get at. All right, so good evening, everyone. Here we are. Moving forward with Kala Rinpoche's book, Profound Buddhism. And we are in page 98, and we were just starting to touch on the subtle body. Again, teachings that, generally you don't get because they're higher, quote unquote, practice. And lots of preliminaries generally need to be done before that. And also all these higher practices, all the tantric practices are not different from the mindset of bodhicitta. So they're often not, taught in terms of a practical way to, Dharma centers. It usually takes some years. But nonetheless, I wanted to share some things. Because the Dharma is so, I think, amazingly practical and yet unknown. And really the greatness of this is that there's just such a body of teachings, which as you begin to understand them and kind of marinate in them, I mean, it all hangs together, but there's such guidelines for us, and very, very helpful. So, they talk about the view, the meditation, and action. All of these three are intertwined, but the Dharma has so many very helpful kind of conceptual categories and scales, which again put things in a perspective, which is helpful to us because it helps us learn and therefore practice with confidence. It's the confidence that's really so important and very, very destructive, because you can sit through meditation and boy, if a doubt starts grabbing you, you want to have some way of dealing with that doubt. We have such a habit of just giving such an ultimate reality to our thoughts. And we've all seen this. They can just dominate. That's what the world is, really. So all these teachings are very important, but at any rate, on view, it's often taught that Buddha's path is the middle way between the extremes of eternalism and nihilism. So what are eternalism and nihilism? What is this proper view? Well, if you can think of it, both nihilists, and there's said to be like 180 different nihilistic views and 180 different eternalistic views too. So it's all very nuanced and scaled. But nonetheless, on both of them, a nihilist believes in the reality of appearances, but doesn't believe in anything else. So there's nothing sort of behind it all. I mean, they can believe in a sophisticated way, such as atoms as opposed to our appearances, or even down to quantum, or all the subtle physics going on. But they don't believe in mind. So they don't believe that there's anything other than that. And they consider basically our mind and our consciousness as being what's called an epiphenomenon, just sort of a product of this material stuff. So they're materialists. And there was one important school, I guess, in ancient India that's often cited in these texts when they're talking about view, because there was a very strong, like a modern atheistic, materialistic sect in India that the Buddha, at the Buddha's time. So, but basically, again, they believe in the reality of what we're seeing. You can think of it maybe like, I don't know, like Bolsheviks or something. They just had total belief in human beings and the appearances, stuff, objects, all of that, and they're fighting over it all. But they didn't believe in any mind in that. It was all material. On the other hand, the eternalists believe in the reality of all this too, but they believe in a transcendent state. But because their belief is very concrete, this stuff is real. They don't see the dreamlike nature of like our bodies. And so therefore, since they believe in the concrete reality of this, their transcendent idea is kind of concrete too. There's a creator God. There's some sort of eternal substance out there. And the Buddhists are the middle way. So we have, these teachings that have arisen out of Buddha's great realization. I mean, again, he taught for some 40, 45 years, something like that. Tremendous body of material. And then from that time, can you imagine, Buddhists had to keep it together. What do you do when he wasn't around? And so they put together all the sutras from Ananda's memory, basically. And then they started having sort of specialization. You'd have some monks that were upholding one particular sutra, others another sutra. And so they kept it going like that, kind of like the ancient Greeks and Homer or something, this tremendous memorization. And then, but the whole body was being transmitted in this very person-to-person way. I mean, think of it, no technology. They weren't even printing. I think there wasn't anything printed for written down. Forget about printing. There wasn't anything written down for some 200 years after the Buddha passed away. So I came across this verse from the Platform Sutra. Now, in China, there was one of the patriarchs of the Zen schools. His name was Wei Ning. And, just a very interesting life story, because he was a very poor boy. His mother was a widow, and they survived by him going out on the mountainsides and collecting firewood, like kindling, and then bringing that to the marketplace and selling it. So it was a very simple existence, he and his widowed mother. But obviously, some tremendous previous lifetimes. Because he was selling his wood in the marketplace. I think he was a teenager, and a Buddhist monk came through and was chanting, I think the Diamond Sutra, I'm not sure, but chanting a sutra anyway. And that triggered his complete enlightenment. And he eventually made his way to a monastery, which is one of the top monasteries in China at the time. And the Zen master there noticed, his qualities, but kept it secret, because monasteries can be places with all sorts of jealousies and rivalries and all sorts of stuff. But eventually, he went to see the master knew he was going to be passing away and wanted to have a contest to see who would be his successor. And he did this by having people write poetry just with chalk on the side of the monastery wall. And the head monk was the favorite, and he wrote a verse on the wall, something about cleaning the mirror. The mind is a mirror bright, and we have to clean it all the time. And Huineng, who again was the servant at the monastery, saw this, and he couldn't even write, but he had someone write for him that there is no mirror bright. So it was like, sort of beyond any conceptual understanding. And of course, the master recognized him as being who should be the next head of this entire school of Buddhism, actually. Well, of course, this sort of precipitated a riot, and the monks chased him out of the monastery, but that's another story. So, but he's considered in China to have been fully enlightened, like a Buddha. The Tibetans, would consider, say, Milarepa or Guru Rinpoche and others as being fully enlightened. This is the greatness of the Tibetan culture. Now, they had different methods. They were practicing the Tantra, which they believe is the methods for our time, this degenerate time that we live in. And so they produced supposedly these superior results. But regardless of all of that, you've got Milarepa, then you have Huineng. So this is a verse that Huineng wrote, not at that time, but later. This is in some of his writings were put together and called the Platform Sutra. So it's not the Buddha words in a sutra, but it has this kind of reverence and respect. He said, false views make up the world. True views are the world beyond. When true and false are both dismissed, your Buddha nature will manifest. This is simply the straightforward teaching, also known as the Mahayana. Delusion lasts countless kalpas. Awareness takes but an instant. So this is very wonderful. It's very reminiscent of verse 34 in Shantideva's entering the Bodhisattva path, the Bodhicharya Avatara. I didn't plan on it, but I think I have it with me. See if I can find this for you. This is verse 34 in, not sure which chapter, the chapter of wisdom, I believe. Let's see. Yeah, verse 34 of chapter 9, the wisdom chapter in Shantideva. When an existence is not accepted, of which it may be said that it does not exist, then non-existence is without foundation. How, again, can it stand before the mind? So that's a little bit subtle and mind-boggling, but they're better translations of this. This is a kind of a pioneering translation by a professor at Columbia years and years ago. There's better where it's clearer, but basically, when neither existence nor existence exist in the mind, that's the great emptiness. So this is really the same thing that Huineng is saying here. False views make up the world. True views are the world beyond. When true and false are both dismissed, your Buddha nature will manifest. This is simply the straightforward teaching, also known as the Mahayana. Delusion lasts countless kalpas. Awareness takes but an instant. I like the simplicity of it and the profundity of it, because all of what we say is the Mahayana, all of these teachings, this entire book that we're doing, all the things that we've been taught, it's like exploring every little nook and cranny of our mind and exhausting the wrong habits there. This is the purification, the mental purification that's happening. Wherever we're stuck, wherever our obstacles are, you can just jump right into it, so to speak. But that is really a daunting thing. And the experience of the Tibetans is so inspiring because they had, with all of this method, these tremendous results. You can see it in their great practitioners and in the teachers that we have right here, right now. So this is really something that's really wonderful to understand the skillfulness of the methods. Because we have all sorts of conditionings. We have all sorts of hang-ups, you might say. We have all sorts of unbidden assumptions that are really obstacles that we don't even recognize as obstacles because we haven't even recognized them. But the practices purify all of that. And I know for me, it was very kind of, I was lacking faith in the method. For some reason, I understood this to be my path. But at the same time, I didn't have any confidence in the method. And I thought that, you were just sort of, you were either born a Buddha or you weren't. And it's just like, sort of too bad. Because the method of what we're going through here with profound Buddhism, the Mantrayana, the extraordinary Mahayana, the method is different. And so in some senses it isn't, but it's kind of disguised because it's not this simple teaching of, the shamatha and vipassana, although there is totally shamatha and vipassana in the visualizations. But nonetheless, they don't seem that way. Again, it's this difference in view, you might say. In the conventional Mahayana, we think of ourselves as an ordinary sentient being. And we're climbing this ladder, so to speak, to Buddhahood. We're gathering merit. We're purifying our obscurations. And there's this positive, gradual process happening. So it's the perfection of wisdom. We're practicing all of the perfections. We're practicing wisdom itself, but the perfection of wisdom, step by step by step, higher, higher, higher. In the Vajrayana, though, as opposed to practicing the causes of awakening, we're practicing the result of awakening. And what is the result of awakening? I'm a Buddha right now. So we jump right there, even though it seems like we're pretending, and we visualize ourselves as a Buddha. And we understand the mind of the Buddha, which is total loving kindness, compassion, wisdom. And we actually have the actual form of the Buddha. Because it's imagined, it's still our mind. There's still this subtle form there. So it's extremely skillful because it doesn't seem like we're doing anything. We have such an idea in the conventional Mahayana, based on our ideas of ourselves as an ordinary sentient being. So there's real harmony there, and it seems right, and it is right. But at the same time, there are these extraordinary teachings that take certainly faith. The faith is really, really important. But that's the Mahayana. So when Hui Neng says, there we are, false views make up the world. That is samsara. Everyone's running around with false views. Limited views. They may be extremely attached to them, and they think if we can only kill all the kulaks off, then we're going to have happiness. Just all these ideas that are out there, they're so strong. False views make up the world. And even our own ordinary false views of this stuff seeming kind of like real, the stuff seeming complete, absolute reality to it. And yet if we look at our own experience, I look at my granddaughter and I think, there too, I was once 6 years old. Is that the same person as now? So, false views make up the world. True views are the world beyond. Think of it as the teachings on the Pure Land. It's like this monk that came to a Chinese master and said, "Master, is the Pure Land real?" And he said, "Is this real?" And the monk said, "Well, yes, this is all real." And he said, "The Pure Land is more real." So these true views are the world beyond. In other words, it's said that we're practicing, the lowest motivation is for a better next lifetime. That's not a Buddhist motivation, but still, true views can get you there. In other words, you're going to be generous because you believe in this transcendent kind of result. But then you can practice to purify, to not be reborn. You can practice to liberate all sentient beings, to come to Buddhahood, to birth in the Pure Land where everything's more easily and effectively practiced. So true views are the world beyond. The Dalai Lama, in my view, is so effective, raises such trust in people and happiness in people who know nothing about the teachings. But it's because he has this view, true views are the world beyond. He's not touched by that kind of worldly angst and the worldly suffering that we all go through, the disappointments. He's not living in that. When true and false are both dismissed. So this shows you that the truth is something that's beyond our views. It's something beyond concept. And yet how do we dismiss our views? We need the true views. We do. We can't just reject all of this and say, I'm just going to jump right into enlightenment. It just doesn't work that way. Rare individuals like Hui Neng, but who knows what he did in his previous lifetime. So when true and false are both dismissed, we're not playing with those anymore. Your Buddha nature will manifest. Gaur Rinpoche has taught that when you still the afflictive emotions, if you can have one moment that they're not there, your Buddha nature manifests. This is simply the straightforward teaching, also known as the Mahayana. So this is the Mahayana, and this includes both the Sutrayana and the Tantrayana, both the conventional Mahayana and the extraordinary Mahayana. In this sense, there's no difference. Delusion lasts countless kalpas. Awareness takes but an instant. It's an amazing thing. This is Manjushri's sword. You know, it cuts through that Gordian knot of stuff. It can go right through it like butter. We just have to know how to wield the sword, so to speak, and discover our sword. So I wanted to quote that today because I think it's very helpful, because it's very simple in a way. It has so many teachings just right there. And then you understand what we're doing is we're developing these pure thoughts. We're developing the thoughts that are beyond, so to speak. But then we're actually seeing into the unreality of those thoughts too, to realization. It's really, really something. These two truths of Nagarjuna. Okay, so we live in a state of natural freedom, but kind of sounding like the Communist Manifesto, everywhere people are in chains. It's really this kind of paradox of paradox that we live in. And the painful thing is that the more that we see the truth of these teachings, you know, you see the suffering that people are doing to themselves, all in the attempt to be happy. It's so tragic. It's just a state of not knowing. And yet in our own practice, it becomes, you know, the faith becomes stronger because we see our own not knowing. It's so not knowing that you don't even know it's not knowing. This is the tremendous destructive power of ignorance. It's just kind of a passive thing, but out of that darkness comes all sorts of action, stumbling around in the dark. So let's continue on with Kala Rinpoche. We are on 99. He had just introduced us to the channels, the winds, and the tiglies. And later on in some of these teachings, it gets very, very detailed. I mean, you know, they concern Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, Nirmanakaya. So these vast inner understandings of some of these symbols. Okay, so support of the inner states is where we're at, page 99. In the channels, it's the subtle body now, subtle winds and tiglies are these little sort of concentrated dots, drops, circulate. Under the influence of the tiglies, we feel various states of mind. Their circulation conditions our inner states, happiness and unhappiness, joy and suffering, exaltation or depression. In reality, all happiness and pleasant experience have as their basis the radiation of Tiglis. So this is very, arcane, because we're dealing with a subtle body, and it has its own theory. And of course, like everything else with practice, it can be practiced and experienced. But for right now, he's just giving us an outline. As we do not fully understand that happiness and joy felt by the mind fundamentally arise from these concentrations of subtle energy, we think that happiness and joy come from external objects. This engenders sexual desire and all kinds of attachments. Channels, subtle winds, and tiglis do not come from the physical elements of the father and mother gathered during procreation. They are the product of karmic process. In last analysis, they are only a product of our mind. It is one of the ways the mind manifests. In the Vajrayana, one envisions the pure aspect of these three elements. It is said that subtle channels are the body of awakening, subtle winds are the speech of awakening, and the tiglis are the awakened mind. From the point of view of Buddhahood, the channels are the body of emanation, Nirmanakaya, the winds are the body of perfect experience, Sambhogakaya, and the tiglis are the absolute body, Dharmakaya. So this to me is just so mind-boggling in terms of our ordinary kind of assumptions about the world and that you can have some little tiny, visualized drop, and that is the Dharmakaya. I mean, in all the years that Gretchen and I practiced at a Western Zen center, no one ever talked about Dharmakaya. And let alone Tigli, it just sounds like this is just fantasy. It isn't until you meet these teachers that have been trained in this and have realized this, that you realize, the very beneficial result, even on our gross outer appearance level. Now, tiglis and sexuality. Furthermore, the tiglis are intimately mixed with the sexual substances. The man's sperm is called white tigli, or the woman's ovum is called red tigli. In the Vajrayana, it is said that if one can preserve these red and white tiglis, that is to say, to remain chaste, then an increasingly strong sense of happiness and joy arises in the mind. According to this vehicle, one should not damage the tiglis, that is to say, lose sexual substances. If one knows the corresponding techniques of meditation, one is able to engender a state of great bliss. The fact of not damaging these white and red tiglis produces positive physical effects. Any contact with the skin of a rugged or a soft object produces a pleasant sensation. When one is unable to apply adequate techniques, the energy of the tiglis gives birth to sexual desire that in turn damages the tiglis. So this is another view of samsara. At the moment of union, one feels a brief instant of happiness, but the more one loses his or her tiglis, the more physical and mental feelings of joy and happiness decrease. When we damage them very frequently, we will feel inner suffering and anguish. We will not feel well, and our health will be poor without any apparent cause for these problems. So these subtle energies, the particles, the channels, the winds, sometimes I think of it in my very uneducated and crude way as being like genetic surgery. You have a problem, doctors can do something for you on the surface, all that's very great, even get a cure that way. But with some of these, amazing genetic techniques, they go down where we can't see anything, and yet get some remarkable cure. So it's kind of like that in a spiritual sense. We have these subtle bodies. All the things we're doing in our outer ways are manifestations of our mind, but they're at the gross kind of level. Often when visualizing a mandala, for instance, you can have sort of layers of protection around you. Um, so, um, you can have a layer in, it corresponds to elements. So you can have the first layer of, just billions of wrathful beings, and a tremendous wind blowing, like a hurricane. And then the next level up, it's a little bit grosser, right? It's fire. So it's just like you just have a holocaust of fire going on with all these wrathful beings. And then above that, further, water. So like tsunamis just raging everywhere. And above that, what? Well, Mount Meru, the solidity of our beliefs. Now, when they're pure beliefs, they have, a protective quality. But normally in our unenlightened way, the heaviness of those pure beliefs, of those impure beliefs, weigh us down and create tremendous obstacle. Trying to get through them is harder than trying to drill through Mount Everest.
Right.
Yeah.
Just to go back, before Tiglis and sexuality, you
Yeah.
had Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Nirmanakaya.
Yeah.
I just missed that part. Could you just say that a little bit again?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
No, good. So we have the teachings, obviously, in the conventional Mahayana of the Nirmanakaya, the delusive body of the Buddhas that the Buddhas teach even deluded beings like us. And then you have the body of pure experience, the Sambhogakaya, which are all these visualized deities. And then you have the Dharmakaya, which is the vastness, so to speak, nothing you can say about it. So the Dalai Lama explains this sometimes as, the Dharmakaya is like space. It's just completely vast. It can be put, there's space in the smallest atom, but there's space in the whole kalpa. I mean, there's just, in galaxies, there's just nothing you can say about space. It's limitless. But at the same time, the space, like the sky, is blue. It has quality. It's not just an emptiness or vacuity. There's something there that, with quality that's alive, you might say. So that's the Dharmakaya. Now, in this vastness of space arises these tremendous cumulus clouds. This is the Sambhogakaya. We can't touch them. They're above us. And yet they are form, so we can relate to them more easily. We can relate to the Dharmakaya through the appearances of the Sambhogakaya. And the experience of the Sambhogakaya is totally bliss. So in the Tantra, in the higher states of Tantra, what we're actually doing is riding bliss, the energy of bliss, to enlightenment. Whereas in the lower stages of practice, of course, we have to stay away from bliss because we just like it too much. So then, out of those cumulus clouds, though, comes the rain. This is the Nirmanakaya. This is the blessings of the Buddha touching us, just giving the plants and animals a life, and everything is positive. So that's Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Nirmanakaya. So the Nirmanakaya body is said to be the delusive body of the Buddhas. Buddha looks like some old man in India sitting under a tree, but that's just how he appeared to us in this Nirmanakaya manifestation. So now in the inner tantras, they talk about the channels, and they talk about the channels as being the Nirmanakaya. This is the form of mind that we can relate to in this way more easily, and that the winds, the energies, the lung, prana, going through the channels are the Sambhogakaya. They are the expression of speech of the Buddhas, and they're not as gross, you might say, as the channels. You can't really pin them down at all. You can visualize the channels as having a form, but of course the lung, you can't visualize at all as having form. It's just energy flowing like wind. But then the Tiglis are the Dharmakaya. The Tiglis are like the root, you might say, the power of all of it, the vastness. And in this amazing way, in our subtle body, which exists, but you're not going to find it under a microscope, in the Tiglis are these little drops but these incredibly powerful points that can be meditated on, obviously. So going back to the text, where'd we go? Here he is. Channels, subtle winds, and tiglis. Tigli is also Bindu in Sanskrit. Tigli, I think, is Sanskrit. I think is Tibetan. So I think Bindu, it's in Sanskrit. But anyway, channels, subtle winds, and tiglis do not come from the physical elements of the father and mother gathered during procreation. They are the product of karmic process. In last analysis, they are only a product of our mind. It is one of the ways the mind manifests. So just like we're manifesting in this gross outer way right now, our subtle body is also manifesting. And it is a function of our past karma, what we've done. Say a little bit more about that. But in the Vajrayana, one envisions the pure aspects of these three elements. The whole practice of the Vajrayana is pure vision. It is said that subtle channels are the body of awakening. Subtle winds are the speech of awakening, and the tiglis, the awakened mind. So this corresponds to Nirmanakaya as being the body, Sambhogakaya as being speech, and Dharmakaya being the mind. From the point of view of Buddhahood, the channels are the body of emanation, Nirmanakaya. The winds are the body of perfect experience, Sambhogakaya. And the tiglis are the absolute body. So again, a lot of teachings here, but the point of these teachings now is to first generate faith and confidence. I mean, like I've always felt, it's like when the Dalai Lama won the Nobel Peace Prize. Ordinary people could have a greater degree of confidence than they had before. Maybe he was just this interesting kind of God king, that was out of Tibet. They had all kind of heard about it and that. But when he won the Nobel Peace Prize, many more people could say, well, I don't know anything about this guy, but somebody must have checked him out to give him this award. So it's like these detailed teachings also give us confidence, because you can be practicing these and the Lama can say, well, you will do this and a blue dot will arise in your mind at the level of your heart. And because there are these detailed teachings, you can have confidence. Again, what strikes me about the Dharma again and again and again is the articulation of it. It's one thing to say Buddha nature. We all thrive on that, right? But at the same time, all these different descriptions, Dharmata, Dharmakaya, all of these things are coming at it from so many different angles and facets. There's nothing that can really be said about it, and yet they're trying. And this is the great work of compassion, obviously. Okay, does that help a little bit?
Yeah, that helped.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's good. I thought maybe you had checked out.
Just, I have to click on this thing.
Because like they say, an enlightened person can say all the wrong words, but have the right effect on the student. Conversely, an unenlightened person, like myself, can say all the right words and have the wrong effect on the student. So we rely on the Dharma here. It's safer. Okay. Emotions, subtle energies, and humors. We saw that in a totally pure manifestation, channels, winds, and tiglis are the three bodies of the Buddha. In an impure manifestation, they give way to what is called the three humors in Tibetan medicine: wind, phlegm, and bile. To understand this principle, it's necessary to envision a broad functioning on three levels. Conflicting emotions, such as desire, hatred, and mental obscurity, produced in the mind itself and intervening as a fundamental cause. Subtle channels, winds, and tiglis intermediates between the mind and body and having the role of an acting cause. And then the three humors are the results of the two preceding levels. We'll go back over this because, these are really kind of profound teachings and also new kind of terminologies. Although we cannot identify wind as a substance in the body, this wind has its seat in the pelvis and in the area of the pelvic belt. The bile has its seat in the liver and blood and the intermediate part of the trunk. As for the phlegm, its seat is in the brain, the uppermost part of the body. Traditional Buddhist medicine lists 404 kinds of illnesses provoked by a disturbance of one or another of these humors, according to three cases: excess, insufficient, and disruption. For example, an excess of wind gives way to a certain type of sickness. An insufficiency of wind gives rise to another type. If the wind tends not to remain in its place, another type of sickness appears. Some pathologies are also due to a kind of aberrant association of two or even three of these humors, giving way to a united sickness. From the three fundamental dysfunctions, excess, insufficiency, and disruption, to which are added aberrant associations, all problems affecting the sense organs, inner organs, skin, bone, nerves, or other parts of the organism are produced. And then let's read further this next part before discussing it a little bit. Material and spiritual treatments. The main remedy for these 404 types of sicknesses consists of practicing the Dharma. By practicing the Dharma with our body, speech, and mind, we purify many negative karmic potentials within us, and by doing so, we uproot the illnesses they would have produced. When one is confronted with illnesses provoked by the collection of the 8 great classes of harmful spirits, each one having subsections, one will find the best remedy to be rituals of the Dharma. Aside from this spiritual approach to healing, and to the extent we actually attribute a material reality to our body, we also have material treatments like medicines, acupuncture, and surgery. But again, their beneficial effects cannot be considered outside a spiritual context, since they reflect our merit associated with the compassion of the Buddhas. Tibetan medicine, the traditional Buddhist medicine, is not the only method for easing the sufferings of illness. In a certain sense, one can consider all medicine as a manifestation of awakening. Buddhist medicine goes back to the time of Shakyamuni Buddha, who, once taking the form of the Buddha Sanjay Menla, that's the medicine Buddha, expounded the 8 branches of the medical art in the 4 tantras of medicine. Tantras are texts. Even if other medical traditions do not offer the aspect of having been revealed, they nevertheless are the expression of awakening. Our actual mind, our actual mind is the conjunction of 2 aspects. One aspect is pure, comparable to clear water, called the potential of primordial awareness. Sanskrit, alaya jnana. That term, alaya jnana, again, these terms are so helpful to us. Alaya, the Himalaya. Alaya means storehouse. So Hima is snow, and the Himalayas actually means the storehouse of the snows, where all the snows are. And jnana, this comes up in one of the White Tara texts, for instance. When you see the jnana, it's almost always a long life mantra. But jnana is knowing. So the potential of primordial awareness. This is the source of all positive manifestations of the mind. The other aspect of mind is impure as a muddied water, forming the potential of individualized consciousness. In Sanskrit, alaya vijnana. So this is interesting. The word for consciousness in Sanskrit is vijnana. What is jnana? Jnana in Tibetan is yeshe. It's primordial awareness. The awareness that's unmanifested, undeveloped rather, unfabricated. Jnana. Consciousness is vijnana. V is division. So it's inherently divided. We live in a situation with consciousness where everything is divided, through this sense of self. So consciousness is extremely profound and extremely valuable, not to be discarded. But the greatness of the Dharma is that, in a sense, it goes beyond. It goes beyond consciousness, individual consciousness. So you've got clear water in the mind, you've got muddy water in the mind. This is the source of all negative activities, producing the suffering of samsara. Pure primordial awareness and ordinary individualized consciousness dwell together within our mind. Beneficial and useful substances taken from plants, animals, or minerals can be used as remedies, and the art of using them are the reflection of primordial awareness. Harmful substances and their utilization are the reflection of ordinary consciousness. In this sense, all medicines, whether Tibetan or Western, are an expression of the purity of the mind. It is my personal conviction that all medical arts are the activity of awakening, a conviction that can be shared by everyone. Okay, so just a word on Tibetan medicine, because there's very little of Tibetan medicine that has been transmitted to the West, because it takes extensive training and learning. And even the substances, were all developed in Tibet and the Himalayas, in India. And where do you find these things? We haven't even translated the words. When we put together some of the, like when the lamas are consecrating a stupa or a statue, and they're putting various blessing substances inside the statue, there's always this challenge of what word are they talking about? Because these names, it's like, what does the word, I don't know, mulberry tree, what's that in Sanskrit? It's language problems. There's so much knowledge. But in Lhasa, in Tibet, you have the famous Potala. But as you looked out from the Potala and then to the west, there was this big kind of, not a mountain, but this big outcropping. And at the top of that, they had the Tibetan Medicine College. Unfortunately, I believe it was destroyed by the communists, and they put a radio tower up there.
Did you get to see that when you were there?
Oh, we saw our guide, though, was an interesting man. He was Tibetan. He fled Tibet and then came back. But his mother does prostrations around that outcropping. So it's still there. But the knowledge is just so extensive, and the techniques of diagnosis. There's this famous story. I'll have to find it. I think I have it saved somewhere, of a writer who was a resident, medical resident in New Haven at Yale Medical School. And one day they announced that this Tibetan doctor was going to come and do their rounds with patients with them. And he was thinking like, oh, what the hell are we doing here? We got faith healers in here now. He was totally skeptical. And so this is Yeshe Dondan, who's passed away, but he actually treated Gretchen once when she had cancer. And they were doing the rounds, and the writer describes that this was in either the Atlantic magazine, I think. They came to this woman middle-aged woman, and she had obviously been poked and prodded by endless doctors, and she just had this just sort of like dull energy. And she was, you can imagine, in a hospital, we see that kind of thing all the time. So they're going to have, without telling him, they're going to have Yeshe Dondan diagnose her. And he sat down next to her, took her hand, and then was taking the traditional pulses. There are 9 different pulses, 3 in each finger. And he was just, concentrating like that, but holding her hand. He's a monk, this traditional he's like one of these guys that oozes compassion. And the writer, this skeptical resident, noticed the effect on this woman. Here was the first medical person that had interacted with her ever with any compassion since she had been in the monastery. And he saw her kind of light up and the light in her eyes. And then afterwards, they got to the rounds and they're going to talk about it. And they said, well, what was the matter with her? And he gave this beautiful poetic thing. Lifetimes ago, she did such and such, and she created a cleft in her heart, and the waters have mixed. And so and that was the Western diagnosis. She had a septum in her heart, and her venous and her arterial blood was mixing. But what the doctor touched him was his interaction. But still, he had this amazing ability to diagnose. And he diagnosed Gretchen too, and it was quite amazing because he told her, she had been diagnosed with, a particularly sticky kind of breast cancer. I'm not telling too many schools out of, but it was a particularly nasty kind of tumor, and the doctor wanted to do, total mastectomy kind of thing, and she said no, rather just take the lump out. But before that, she went down. Garmache had her come down to Arizona. And he sat with her knee to knee. He's on the floor, she's on the floor, knee to knee. And he had Abu and Bunima there to attend him. And he put her through 100 long life empowerments, Amitayus, 100 of them, just like, rapid fire kind of thing. And after that, she went to see Yeshe Dondan. And Yeshe Dondan, and she was talking about what the doctors wanted to do and everything. And he said, well, the cancer's gone. So she believed that. And true enough, it was. So that's an example of sort of going against she still has her Western doctorate. We like this guy. And he was just following, the rules as they are. But the other matters, she went through the chemo for it, but she was doing Vajrasattva while she was there doing the chemo. So, you never know these things. But at the same time, there are some remarkable things that happen. And I do have a lot of faith in Tibetan medicine, but it's hard finding anybody that really knows it thoroughly. We have one good friend of our Sangha in New York City who is a medical doctor and has a lot of faith that Tibetans in Queens like him. So I think highly of him. But to the level of the understanding that they had with these humors, that they were a manifestation of, just a grosser manifestation of the winds, of the tiglis, and of the channels. Totally remarkable.
Yeah, Frank, I've been told by actual acupuncturists, including Jason Burke, he brought my mother's eyesight back.
Mm.
He said that the Tibetans were on another level, total other level of healing capabilities with the reading of the pulses.
Yeah.
Because he said he's only good at reading 5.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so remarkable. It's so sad what we do in the modern world because, China's great thing was to modernize Tibet. Because in their own way, they thought this is how you're going to have happiness, right? And so in doing that, you stomp over everything that you don't understand. It's very sad, but welcome to our times. All right, I've talked way too much tonight. First, any questions or comments? Keith, take the microphone. Your dragon voice we need.
Hi, everyone. I just was wondering, do we act the tiglis, the winds, and the channels? I know we've had a lot of discussions about those things, especially from Concho. He's talking about them on one level and on other levels. Because there's the medicine level of them, but there's also the Vajrayana level, right?
Yeah, right.
Or is it all connected?
Well, they're all intimately connected, but yeah, slightly different, grosser level on a material level as part from a purely spiritual level.
So do we tap into that when we're like doing shamatha vipassana? Is that when they kind of materialize? Or I guess they're always there, though, right?
They're always there. And in the higher practices, so to speak, and you actually focus on them and manipulate them in your meditation. So the only example I could give you is maybe Poa, because Poa is one of these where it uses the tiglies. You've got a channel, you get the winds in the channel, you get a little tigli that's jumping up and exiting the crown of your head. So that's an example, but they can be extremely vast and complicated, so to speak, depending. So that's one in the 3-year retreat. That's where those things are taught, basically. They want to make sure that you have a solid foundation, and you start out with, in the Drikung, you start out with long life practice. In case you're misusing any of these things, you want to have a solid, healthy going forward. In the Nyingma, they start out with Vajrakalaya, and they do this purification to get you set. But then they take you through everything.
But I mean, unless we've been received the instructions, so in the regular Sangha,
you don't meditate on them. No.
Meditate, or
No.
we may experience them, but we don't always really know what they are.
Right. If you're doing shamatha and vipassana, you are actually in touch with your true nature. And these are all manifestations of the true nature, manifestations of the mind. So absolutely. It's a little bit like if you're doing mantra, we're actually doing something much more profound than we ordinarily think. And you're actually getting the benefits of that without knowing it. It might manifest at a later time, and you think, oh, this wonderful, some problem in your life that disappeared, or some sort of insight, or some sort of, radical deepening of faith. You don't see that it's the result of all those things you've done. But if you hadn't done all those things, it wouldn't happen. So we don't see the connections, If you see all the connections, you're just a step away from full enlightenment. So that's why faith is so important, though. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Steffi has a question.
Well, you were talking about the Tiglis and sexuality. And it was saying that just simply having sexual desire is a loss of that energy or whatever. Should we all be aiming, therefore, to not have sexual desire at all? Like, is that our goal?
Yeah, no. No, it's so skillful because, again, these are higher practices. All of us. So, again, the start of the Tantra in this world cycle was King Indrabhuti, who king in one of the rajas in ancient India, and he's out on his veranda one day, and he saw a bunch of red things flying overhead, and he said, "What are these great birds?" And his minister said, "No, those aren't birds. Those are monks of the Buddha Shakyamuni." And Indrabhuti said, "I'd like to meet this guy." So they arranged it. So Shakyamuni Buddha comes and meets Indrabhuti, and Indrabhuti says, I'm very impressed by you, and I want to be your student. Yes. Can I be your student? Yes. So he started to give him the monk's vows, and he got to the sexual vows of chastity, and Indrabhuti said, "Please stop right there. I'm a king. I've got obligations. I'm producing heirs, and who knows what else is going on." You know what I mean? And so the Buddha said, "Well, in that case, you do this." And he gave a tantric initiation. I can't remember which one it was. But the point is that you can practice for the lay people. We're not doing those higher kind of practices, but I even hesitate to say the word higher, because when we hear higher, it means we're lower. You know what I mean? It's like you get to sit at the kids' table for Thanksgiving. It's not that. Right? It's not like that. It's all pure vision. So for lay people, you can practice sexuality, and your partner is whatever the yab-yum is. If you're practicing Vajrakalaya, the partner becomes forgot her name, but I can visualize her. Or vice versa. How it works however you want, but it's the pure vision. And then instead of it just being ordinary sexual activity and desire, it's done with this motivation to liberate all. It just changes the whole ball of wax, even if we don't see an immediate result or anything like that. So we're free to do what we do in our situation. King Indrabhuti had to meet his the situation of his life. It's an inner renunciation. It's not an outer. So the inner renunciation is we're no longer thinking we're going to get to ultimate happiness by, just chasing sex around. So suddenly we see sex in its proper way, this incredible power that's there, and we're hooking into that. That's the nature of the Tantra. It can actually use bliss, but always pure vision. Yeah. So not to worry.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
That higher lower thing, just a quick.
Yeah.
One time I was watching some event, I think it was when Trisab was here. There was some event that was going on at the Garchin Institute. And, of course, there's the whole processional for him getting in, right? And, outside. And then he's inside. And then fast forward to, there's two seats, right? And there's a higher seat and a lower seat. And what happens? Garchin Rinpoche goes right to the lower seat. And that caused a huge problem because they were like, no, you're supposed to sit here. And he just kept going, sitting in the seat.
Right.
And they were like, no, you were supposed to sit here.
Right.
He just totally messed up the whole thing. You could watch it. You're like seeing it happen. Like he's taking the lower seat and the other guy, I didn't know who it was really. He's taking the higher seat.
Right.
He was scratching his head the whole time.
Yeah.
I'm not supposed to be sitting here.
These
Rinpoche's judgment.
yeah, right. And these teachers are so skillful. I mean, they're just so skillful. One retreat at Lama Tarchin's, he brought over like 6 lamas from Nepal, had never been to the States before, didn't know any English at all. And one of Lama Tarchin's students was a real character. He was Swiss German, and he had a very forceful personality. Just very. And so we were going through the kata line, greeting them, and give a kata, they give it back, kata, give it back. You're offering to the lama, so to speak, and the blessings come back. That's what they're doing with this scarf. So Hans is up there, I'm standing next to him, gives the kata to this new lama from Nepal who didn't know any English, but he could read Hans, I'm sure. And then instead of giving it back, the lama, you people on Zoom can't see this, but the lama grabbed the scarf to his chest and turned away so Hans couldn't get it. He was totally attached to the scarf. And it just stopped Hans dead in his tracks. But he's so forceful, And so he said, "You're supposed to give that to me." And the lama again turned farther away from him, grabbing it even tighter. And then Hans said, "If I had known you weren't going to give it back to me, I wouldn't have given it to you." So just a wonderful teaching. And what are we actually doing when we give a scarf? All right, Pat. Yeah, all right. All right.
It's neat to go on retreat with a whole bunch of mentally afflicted, crazy people.
All right, let's we should conclude. I've talked way too much, and forgive me for that. It's like it's a blessing and a curse. The tongue. We dedicate this evening to all motherly sentient beings. May each and every one of them come to see their freedom, and may we be the condition that leads them to Buddhahood. Svaha. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Zoomers, for being there. Thanks for the questions.
Thanks very much, Frank.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, guys.
Totally awesome.
Isn't that something? It's so wonderful to witness that. Hans giving teachings to the Lama. It's just samsara in a nutshell to me, It shows you how we all are, I mean, and he's a good man, he's a good practitioner, but it's just the nature of that's it's where we're all at. Tell the Lama, you're doing it wrong. But I just remember that it was the Lama because he was so completely like a great actor. You know what I mean? He just completely became the part. And the way that he was clinging that kata, it was just like the essence of clinging. You know, it was just like, yes, yes, yes. And the way he turned away, so Hans couldn't even have a chance of getting at it if he was trying. You know, it was like so maddening. Oh man. Yeah, Lama Tarchin passed away, I think 10 years ago this week. Yeah. Yeah.
How long did you guys practice?
Since 87. So he passed away in 2013. Hard to believe, isn't it? Yeah, wow. Wow. It's a great Lama.